This weekend in Cowboys Stadium in Arlington, Texas, we've got A&M facing off against Arkansas in the Southwest Conference Classic Rivalry, a rivalry that has come alive in the past 10 years. When it got reinstated in 2009, Arkansas won 3 straight. And then some guy named Johnny Football and the A&M Aggies joined the SEC, rattled off 9 straight wins, until Arkansas knocked off A&M last year to end the 9-game winning streak, and it is alive. Now, I think this game this weekend reeks of need from both teams. I think both teams need this win very badly. And you might be asking, Arkansas is 3-0. Why do they need this win? Well, we see them beat a pretty good Cincinnati team, then go and beat a pretty good South Carolina team. Then you think Game 3, Missouri State, this is a tune-up. This will be easy. Just get us ready for A&M. And then Missouri State was up by 10 points in the fourth quarter. It was a scare, and now I think Arkansas needs to prove to people on the outside of the SEC, on the outside of Arkansas fandom, that they truly are a top 10 team. And we all know why A&M needs this win. If they don't win this, they go 2-2 with still Alabama, Florida, LSU, all those teams still on their schedule. And honestly, they got dominated last week against Miami in the stat game, right? If you look at the final score, they won 17-9. They did exactly what they needed to do. But if you look at the stats, they had 16 first downs to Miami's 27. Miami beat them in yards, total yards, passing yards, rushing yards, time of possession. But you look at that and say A&M's defense was on the field 35 minutes and still only let up 9 points. Pretty good. So now we know what's at stake for both teams. I'd love to go through all the positions, break down who has the advantage on each side of the ball in each position, and see who we really like to win this game on Saturday. Starting off with the most important position in sports, definitely most in football, let's look at these two quarterbacks. I'm going to go ahead and give this advantage to Arkansas, and I don't think that's a surprise. I think 99.9% of people who follow college football would do the same. Now, Max Johnson, he did all right against Miami. Got the win. That's most important. Went 10 for 20, 140 yards and a touchdown. 10 for 20, you'd like to see your quarterback complete more than 50% of his passes, but he didn't turn it over. He did what he needed to do. Most importantly is he didn't do anything terrible. Didn't turn the ball over. Didn't put them in losing positions. But when you look at KJ Jefferson, I mean, he has just dominated this year. Let's look at these stats. He has thrown for 770 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 pick, but he's also rushed for 170 yards and 3 touchdowns. He can do it in the air. He can do it with his legs, and he is a big boy weighing in about 240 pounds. He's hard to take down, and he is the biggest reason why this Arkansas team is 3-0 heading into this game. So, quarterback, advantage Arkansas. Running back, advantage Arkansas. Now, I think Devon Achane's a great running back. I think he's one of the best running backs in the SEC. But I think Arkansas has the best running back in the SEC. Rocket Sanders is my sneaky pick to win the Heisman this year. He's rushed for 440 yards in 3 games with 3 touchdowns, and he even had a 75-yard touchdown against South Carolina get called back. I know you can't add that in. There's so many what-if yards, what-if touchdowns for these players, but he is a beast. Behind this offensive line, with KJ Jefferson also a running-type quarterback, he's going to be a handful for A&M. Now, let's look at the wide receivers. I give this advantage to A&M simply because 2 words, Ainias Smith. I think he could be the best player on the field on Saturday. I think he could be the best player on most fields on Saturdays. He's electric when you get the ball in his hand. And if you look at the stats for each of these wide receiver groups, Arkansas has more yards. But that's because their quarterback has given them the ball more. So those are a little inflated. But I think when you get the ball in Ainias Smith's hands, either on screens, slants, goes, comebacks, special teams, he does incredible things with it. He reminds me a lot of Christian Kirk, who has had a lot of success playing Arkansas. So wide receiver group, advantage A&M. O-line, advantage Arkansas. Arkansas's O-line is big. Their experience, they're mean, They're strong, but most importantly, they're coached by Sam Pittman. All of these guys, over the offseason, gained weight. They put on more muscle. They put on more weight, and you can tell. Last year, if you look at their stats, they paved the way for the most rushing yards per game and did that with 4 different running backs. That tells you it wasn't one great running back who was doing all these amazing things. It was an offensive line paving the way for him. They also let up the 10th fewest sacks in the country. Offensive line, advantage Arkansas. Now let's move on to the defensive side. Starting with the defensive line, advantage Arkansas. A&M's defensive line has only gotten 3.5 sacks this whole year and has let up around 180 yards in rush offense. Now again, it's not only the defensive line, but that's where it starts. It starts up front. And when you're 90th in FBS and rushing yards allowed per game, there's a good chance the team you're playing is going to have a better defensive line than you. Rocket Sanders is going to have a day, and it's because of A&M's defensive line. And if you look at Arkansas's defensive line, they have 8.5 sacks between all 3 or 4 of them. They're 10th best in the FBS, only allowing 78 rushing yards per game. Defensive line, advantage Arkansas. Linebackers, advantage Arkansas. This might be the biggest gap, other than quarterback, between these two teams. These linebackers are led by 2 absolute tackling machines. Now, they're not flashy, they're not fast, but they don't miss tackles. And that is the most important thing when you look at a linebacker. Bumper Poole in 2020 had the 2nd most tackles per game of any SEC linebacker. In 2021, he was 3rd in the SEC in total tackles. He is an absolute beast. And this is going to be his 3rd year starting every single game.
They stick with the run game right. Swallowed up immediately. Drew Sanders in on the scene.
Former 5-star, transferred from Alabama to Arkansas and hasn't missed a beat. He has 5.5 sacks on this year. They both lead their team, and they're both top 5 tacklers in the SEC. And they are the reason that Arkansas has this advantage at the linebacker position. And let's look at secondary, our last position group of this episode, and I give that advantage to A&M. Now, I think it's just as much A&M has a good secondary as I think Arkansas doesn't have that great of a secondary. Even when they had Jalen Catalon, the preseason All-American, I don't think Arkansas had that great of a secondary. And now he's hurt and out for the year, so they really don't. If you look back at that Cincinnati game, one thing you may have missed, may have forgotten about after 3 weeks later, is that Cincinnati had a lot of chances to connect on deep balls. If Ben Bryant would have hit half of his passes deep, this could have been a very different game. Cincinnati wide receivers were streaking down the field open often over this Arkansas secondary. And if you look at this A&M secondary, they're skilled, they're veteran. If you look at their corner, Jalen Jones, he's a 3-year starter. He was out the first 2 games, came back from Miami, played great. Miles Jones, out the first 2 games, came back from Miami, played great as well. And Antonio Johnson at safety, he's a preseason first-team All-American. I think this gap is big between the 2 position groups, and that's why I'm giving A&M the advantage in the secondary. So when you look at all these positions and you ask, who's going to win the game? I think it would be silly of me not to go Arkansas. They have the advantage in the 3 most important positions in football, and that is quarterback, offensive line, and defensive line.